And the word in the Bahamas right now is it is too late to get out. With Dorian on their doorstep, people are forced to weather this and hunker down, especially in two islands that are directly in Dorian's path. Abaco Island and Grand Bahama, the northernmost chain part of the Bahamas, where right now people have already evacuated in anticipation of Dorian's arrival come later today. And we have some video just in showing the waves and the winds starting to pick up in Abaco Island, which is where Dorian will first make landfall. We know that power was turned off there by the power company in anticipation of Dorian moving in to make sure there weren't any electrical issues. And up and down the Bahamas, people have been keeping an incredibly close eye on its path due to the ever-shifting nature of this hurricane, which, as you mentioned, is now a Category 5. The Bahamas has very low elevation, putting it at great risk for this storm surge, estimated anywhere from 10 to 15 feet, that could be washing inland, putting hundreds in danger. I had a chance to speak to the commander of a local search and rescue operation who tells me that they've gone ahead and pre-positioned a lot of their gear ahead of time in those areas where they think Dorian may hit the hardest. But he says, Morgan, it doesn't matter how many of these hurricanes you go through, it never gets any easier. And right now, a great sense of uneasiness in the Bahamas, especially in those two northernmost islands where Dorian has already started to show itself. Harry?
Well, Morgan Chesky, thanks. Those few sandbags aren't going to help very much. Let's get an update now on where Dorian is headed. WNBC's Maria LaRosa is with us this morning. Maria, a lot going on out there.
Absolutely, Harry. What you're looking at right now is a horrifyingly perfect tropical machine. There is nothing in its way. Powerful and heading right towards the Bahamas. It is a Category 5, maximum winds of 160 miles per hour, 225 miles east of West Palm Beach, Florida. Still on its slow westward movement at about 8 miles per hour. It is going to continue to slow down. That is the scary part, as you can see, coming in through the Bahamas tonight and through early tomorrow as a major hurricane, perhaps a Category 4, but look at how slowly it moves by Tuesday morning and then into Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday, still in the vicinity of the Bahamas as a major hurricane. This will be devastating. Then we expect it to take that turn, likely seeing that it is going to stay off the coast of Florida, but it is not out of the realm of possibility, so still stay on alert. Then continuing towards the southeast coast, including areas like Savannah and Charleston, need to pay close attention as we get into Thursday, and then Friday beginning to close in on the Outer Banks, still as a hurricane at this point by Friday morning. Stay on high alert along the southeast coast and the Outer Banks. All of the hazards potential here, along with that storm surge, the heavy rain, and the gusty winds. Notice how even from far from the center, still a high likelihood of at least tropical storm gusts. We're talking 50, 60 miles per hour. And then, of course, Harry, the heavy rain potential here. Most of it staying off the shore right now, but that is according to the current forecast. That is why these areas with the potential for big flooding need to pay close attention in the coming days. Harry?
Big storm. Maria, thank you very much.
A mail truck. People terrified outside this movie theater as bullets fly. Ducking for cover, shielding their children.
We're gonna be okay.
Vehicles riddled with bullets.
It was like pop, 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 pop.
Among those wounded, a 17-month-old child. Team coverage, we're on the ground in Odessa, Texas.
Bracing for Dorian, the Category 4 hurricane bearing down on the Bahamas with 150-mile-an-hour winds. Tourists cutting their vacations short.
Let's just get out.
Life-threatening storm surge predicted for the southeast coast. Dorian's path still uncertain.
It is the most inconsistent hurricane probably the state of Florida has ever seen.
Gas stations overcrowded, store shelves cleared out. Our weather team tracking this hurricane's every move.
RBG gets personal. The Supreme Court Justice delivering an update on her health.
Well, first, this audience can see that I am alive.
Plus, her words of wisdom to J-Lo, who asked for marriage advice.
And a lesson in sportsmanship.
There it is.
Naomi Osaka defeating 15-year-old phenom Coco Gauff, consoling her tearful opponent just minutes after the match. The tennis champ's class move on center court.
Live from ABC News in New York, this is Good Morning America.
And good Sunday morning, everybody. We have a lot to cover this morning. Hurricane Dorian packing 150-mile-per-hour winds. A storm just a few hours from landfall in the Bahamas, where it's expected to have a potentially devastating impact.
After having its way with the Bahamas, Dorian will lumber toward the east coast of the U.S. From Florida all the way up to the Carolinas, they are making preparations. Major airports suspending operations, utility trucks being pre-positioned, people lining up to fill sandbags. We will have team coverage right here, including the latest on the track of the storm coming up.
But we start here with the breaking news. Another mass shooting in Texas. 5 dead, 21 wounded, including 3 police officers. Video on social media showing people face down on the ground. You can hear the gunshots in the background. Well, this nightmare all started with a traffic stop, and it came 4 weeks to the day after the massacre in El Paso, where 22 people died. ABC's Matt Gutman is in Odessa with more. Good morning to you, Matt.
Hey, good morning, Eva. Police are still processing this scene and still trying to grapple with the sheer scale of this rampage. Up to 13 separate crime scenes, those shootings happening on the interstate, on surface streets, at shopping centers, and ending in that massive shootout outside this theater. Now, among the victims, police officers and that 17-month-old girl.
Get down, get down.
For more than an hour, terror seized the sister cities, Midland and Odessa.
Get down, get down, get down. It's okay.
In a now painfully familiar scene, families diving down, mothers covering their kids with their bodies. A mix of whimpers and semi-automatic gunfire outside a Texas movie theater as the bizarre finale of yet another shooting unfolded.
Between here and there, you're dodging bullets.
It began shortly after 3 p.m. local time, troopers pulling over a 30-something white male before his car fully stopped, rifle fire blasting out his rear window.
Do we have an active shooter?
Wounding an officer and setting in motion a bloody rampage which left 5 dead and more than 20 wounded. Shooting out of his window randomly, say police, the gunman used the highways and streets of these cities as his killing fields.
Their back windshield shot out.
Tiffany Velasquez and her husband Josiah at one point on the road just behind the suspect.
We hear about 4 or 5 pops. And it was like pop, 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 pop. Now my husband's with me, and we see these windows just shot out of these vehicles all around us.
Velasquez watched in horror as people rushed to help. The 17-month-old little girl hit by shrapnel. She's said to be in good condition this morning.
She is up and she's smiling and she's stable.
Amid the chaos, police from 3 different agencies issuing warnings.
In case it goes that way, protect your civilians.
The shooter at one point ditching his vehicle and allegedly carjacking a postal truck. Motorists warned off the roads, businesses closing. A local TV station even evacuating its studio as a precaution. Eventually, police believed he'd entered the Synergy movie theater. SWAT teams stormed.
SWAT kicked in the door. Initially, we thought that the SWAT officer was the shooter.
Rick Lobo was in one of those theaters.
They identified themselves and they're like, everybody out.
They sprinted to a field when they saw it.
Did you actually see the car smash into the roadblock?
We saw everything. It smashed right into it, and then he just started firing shots.
Come on! In the chaos, the shooter seemed to surprise police. Dozens of rounds fired.
But that's how a lot of people get hit. I mean, you're seeing the blood, you're seeing the shots. I heard the shots going over my head. I mean, I'm lucky. There was a lot of people today that probably didn't go home.
Now, authorities have not yet released the name of the shooter. They are telling us, however, that he is a white male in his 30s who just happened to be driving around these cities during the time of that traffic stop with a semi-automatic rifle in his car, multiple ammo clips. Now, it's worth noting that the investigators from the ATF and FBI who will be processing this scene were the same investigators and among them who investigated that El Paso shooting. Whit.
All right, Matt Gutman for us. Thank you. Joining us now from Odessa is Lori Acosta, who happened to be at the movie theater where the shooting spree finally came to an end. Lori, we're so glad that you and the people you're with are okay and appreciate you speaking with us this morning. You were at a birthday party with your nephew, your niece, a bunch of different children who were there, ages 3 to 15 years old, as part of this theater complex. As this was all playing out, walk us through the moments when you first realized that something was wrong.
Our niece and nephew were in there, and so were some of the other party goers that were attending my nephew's birthday party. They were in there, but there was also children that we didn't even know. They were very confused. They didn't know what was going on, and they were all just kind of milling around in there. So some of them were trying to leave the laser tag area to go find their parents. And so my wife and I said, no, guys, look, something's going on. I didn't want to scare the children, so I told them, look, there may be someone in the theater that maybe is trying to hurt people, but you guys are fine. You're okay. We're here with you now. There were no other adults in that area.
Take me right to that moment. Did you see the final shootout? What happened?
Yes, I did. The van was coming down at a high rate of speed. The cruisers were directly behind it. Luckily, police officers had placed a cruiser blocking the path, blocking the road. And the driver of the van never slowed down. He slammed into the cruiser, which spun him around. And whenever he spun him around, within 2 to 3 seconds of the van spinning around and coming to a stop, law enforcement was right on top of him, and they did what they had to do to eliminate that threat. And there was, I mean, more gunfire than I've ever heard in my life, but they eliminated the threat at that moment.
What was going through your mind when you saw that all happen?
I just needed to get to my family to make sure that they were safe.
And we thank you again, Lori Acosta in Odessa, Texas, for us. Thank you. And one thing that Lori pointed out was the chaos and confusion, because unlike other mass shootings where it's a single location, they didn't know what was going on in that movie theater, and people were there, and then the danger came to them, and that's what she witnessed at the very end.
Harrowing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Whit. Well, now to our other top story. Hurricane Dorian, the Category 4 storm bearing down on the Bahamas and taking aim at the U.S. Rob is in Melbourne Beach, Florida, this morning with the latest on where this dangerous storm is heading. Good morning to you, Rob.
Dangerous for sure, Eva. Good morning to you. This is nearly a Category 5 storm now, less than 250 miles from this coastline. And from our drone, you can see just how vulnerable this part of Florida is. Just beyond these protective dunes are hundreds, if not thousands, of homes that line this barrier island, and they are low to the ground. They will be susceptible to surge. This as another serene morning here across the state of Florida. Don't let it fool you. Tropical storm warnings have been posted. We expect the conditions to deteriorate during the day tomorrow as residents here rush to make last-minute preparations for what could be a devastating storm event.
As Hurricane Dorian churns in the Atlantic, states up and down the southeastern U.S. on high alert. Still unsure of exactly where the slow-moving storm will hit.
It is the most inconsistent hurricane probably the state of Florida has ever seen.
The threat for 17 million in the Sunshine State shifting significantly, but Florida officials urging locals to stay vigilant.
We're encouraged by the last 24 hours that have seen the forecast be pushed off Florida's coast, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Fueling officials' concerns are scenes like this when Dorian ripped through the U.S. Virgin Islands earlier this week. Life-threatening winds of up to 150 miles per hour now closing in on the Bahamas. This morning, Dorian's forecast cone brings it stateside towards Florida, Georgia, and the Carolina coast. Both Carolina governors joining Georgia by declaring states of emergency as they prepare for Dorian's impact. Meanwhile, President Trump briefed by emergency officials at Camp David on the storm's updated track. This as Americans in the storm's path load up on food, water, and gas. This gas station in Charleston looking like a stalled toll booth. Florida's Daytona International Speedway, among one of many staging sites where hundreds of power trucks and thousands of linemen from all over the country are pre-positioning to respond to any outages.
Having them close to different resources throughout the state helps us to get to those hardest hit areas as soon as possible.
Utility workers, first responders, FEMA reps coming in, tourists, residents getting out. Mandatory evacuation orders have been pushed to tomorrow because this thing has slowed down, but they're in effect for the Barrier Islands where I stand right now. You can see behind me the waves are beginning to pick up, as is the surf. Here's the satellite picture. This is just a frightening storm to view from any direction, but you look down into that that eye that's about 20 miles across. We've got hurricane force winds that extend about 50 miles in diameter. So this line is very crucial. It takes it about 70 miles off the coast of Florida. If it moves to the west by any degree, you're looking at a big-time hurricane event for Florida, for Georgia, for the Carolinas as well, which will be very close as we go towards the end of the week. So this will be with us all week long, and it's going to be with the Bahamas the most, with Category 4 winds status there. As far as the hurricane warnings are concerned, northwest Bahamas, tropical storm warnings now posted for central Florida coastline because we expect tropical storm conditions within 36 hours. That line will be moved to the north as we go through time as well. So the main impacts for the southeast U.S., life-threatening storm surge, hurricane force winds, very heavy rain, dangerous surf. We're seeing that, rip currents as well. Guys, back to you.
And Rob Marciano on the ground for us in Florida. We'll get back to Rob soon with more on the forecast. We are also on the ground in the Bahamas, where Dorian is due to make landfall today. ABC's Marcus Moore is in Marsh Harbor. Marcus, good morning to you.
Hey, Dan, good morning. We are experiencing off and on periods of rain, and you can see the wind. Look at the trees waving in the wind just behind me here. Already we are experiencing the winds that stretch more than 100 miles from Dorian's eye. This storm sending tourists and residents on this island scrambling for. Overnight, the rush at this airport in the Bahamas as travelers scramble to get off of the island before Dorian storms in. So you're on the last flight out?
Yes.
Out of the Bahamas, or this part of the Bahamas, until after the storm hits?
Yes.
We spent the day speaking to tourists inside the Abaco airport who'd been vacationing during the holiday weekend, now looking to board the last flight out to dodge the dangerous storm. And when it switched to a 4, what did you guys say?
It was, let's go, like, we can't stay.
Bahamians spending the weekend boarding up homes and businesses and stocking up on supplies.
I'm a little nervous about it, you know, and my family in Nassau, they're saying that we need to get out.
What I can say is that 73,000 residents would be impacted by this storm.
The powerful hurricane is expected to sit on the northwestern part of the Bahamas for quite some time, bringing with it devastating winds, torrential rain, and a life-threatening storm surge. And the conditions here on Marsh Harbor in Abaco really took a turn around 2 o'clock this morning, and we know that they are only going to get worse as time goes on. This Category 4 storm is expected to bring 150-mile-per-hour winds that will no doubt be devastating for this part of the Bahamas. Dan?
Marcus Moore on the ground in the Bahamas. It is just the beginning, as he said.
Yeah, and hopefully they stay careful there. Well, from the Bahamas now to Florida, where this storm will bring a life-threatening storm surge, flooding a major concern. ABC's Kaylee Hartung is in Jacksonville, where they're doing what they can to prepare. Good morning, Haley.
Yeah, good morning, Eva. This popular fishing pier in Jacksonville Beach, it's partially closed, and it's a reminder of the battering that this area has taken in recent years. This pier badly damaged 3 years ago during Hurricane Matthew, and again a year later by Hurricane Irma. Neither one of those storms hit this area directly, and yet the impact both of them had here was significant. That is a scenario we're bracing for now.
As the sun shines in Florida, a new warning from Jacksonville's mayor. The incoming storm will be no day at the beach.
It's not time to let your guard down. I had people 2 years ago telling me, gosh, I wish I had listened to you.
Hurricane Irma's damage 2 years ago, a raw cautionary tale. Powerful storm surge pushing the St. Johns River through the city of Jacksonville. But when Mayor Lenny Curry sees this storm's behavior, it takes him back a year further.
What looks familiar about this storm as it approaches?
This looks a lot like Matthew a couple years ago. The wind bands had major impacts, particularly on the coastal and beaches communities.
What did this look like 3 years ago when Matthew hit?
I mean, all this water it flooded in. You wouldn't want to be here when that happened. We did major dune restoration here after Matthew 2 years ago.
The city working hard to prepare, while efforts among the residents vary.
Gas in the tank, cash in the bank, water in the car. Let's go.
We did actually book a hotel in Tallahassee about 3 hours away, just in case.
We're ready to go.
We've watched enough tragedies on television to know that you don't mess around. When you need to go, you go.
What is your biggest concern when you look at this storm?
That people to take it lightly.
Mayor Curry stressing an important part of residents' preparation should be knowing your evacuation zone and your route out. He says if an evacuation order is issued, there is no time to waste, and that is still a possibility here in Jacksonville. Whit.
Important information, Kaylee Hartung for us in Jacksonville. Thank you. Meantime, President Trump has been following the track of Hurricane Dorian from Camp David. ABC's Rachel Scott is at the White House for us this morning with more on how the president is monitoring all of these developments. Rachel, good morning.
Good morning to you, Whit. Well, the White House says the president has received hourly updates on that storm. He received a briefing from FEMA officials yesterday at Camp David after spending some time at his golf club in Virginia. The president will return to the White House today, and then he'll head directly off to FEMA headquarters for another briefing.
And Rachel, back to our top story just for a moment. We know the president has also been briefed on the shooting and that Congress will be back in session this month. Where does the gun control debate stand with lawmakers right now?
That's right. The president was briefed by the attorney general on that shooting. But as he returns to the White House today, Washington is under increased pressure to act on the issue of gun reform. The president has sent mixed signals on where he stands on that front. Following the shootings in El Paso and Dayton, the president said there was a strong appetite for meaningful background checks. But then after a call with the NRA, he said strong background checks already exist. Now, the House Judiciary Committee has plans to discuss gun control legislation as Congress returns this month. But remember, the House has already passed 2 background check bills. So far, it's the Senate that has failed to act. And as calls for gun reform continue to grow, Texas lawmakers are moving in the opposite direction, loosening gun reform restrictions. And new laws go into effect today in Texas, the same state where that shooting was held, that make it easier to carry firearms in public places like schools and churches. Whit?
And that gridlock has existed on gun reform for years. Rachel Scott at the White House for us. Thank you. Also a programming note, tune into This Week later this morning when Martha Raddatz goes one-on-one with acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan for the latest on preparations for Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah,
Eva?
and speaking of Hurricane Dorian, let's check back with weather. All eyes on Hurricane Dorian this morning. Let's go back to Rob in Melbourne Beach. How you doing out there, Rob?
Good morning again, Eva. The forecast for this storm has been fluctuating and frustrating, to say the least. Here's a setup. What's been shoving it off towards the west through the Bahamas and towards the U.S., that high pressure, that's going to weaken on the western fringe of that, so the steering currents kind of drop off. We'll look for it to slow down, to stall. That's never good. It also gives it the opportunity to drift to the north. That may save much of Florida, but maybe not Georgia and the Carolinas. So nobody really wins here unless it stays completely offshore. But you see some of those lines do bring it onshore, and that's what we're most concerned about. Winds are going to gust to over 130, 40 miles an hour across the Bahamas. But look, near hurricane force wind gusts late tomorrow night into Tuesday morning, West Palm Beach up through Fort Pierce, the central coast, the northern coast as well. We're going to see similar gusts even through Georgia and the Carolinas through the midweek. So this is a all-week storm for the most part. That's what's happening with Dorian. Here's a look at your local forecast.
Hello and good morning, Washington. Here's a Sunday morning update on Hurricane Dorian. Right now, you see that Category 4 storm, 150-mile-per-hour winds. This will be moving to the west, just off the coast of Florida by Tuesday morning. So very slow movement through the Bahamas. A very dangerous storm for them.
185-mile-per-hour winds destroying parts of the Bahamas. People there pleading for help.
Everyone pray for us.
Homes destroyed, massive power outages, entire communities underwater. The harrowing rescues our reporter just witnessed. And the race to get out. Dorian now heading towards Florida. Mandatory evacuations underway in some parts. States of emergency up through North Carolina. Rob Marciano on why the devastation is just getting started. And the other breaking headline, the deadly highway rampage, the chaos and terror as bullets rang out from a speeding car. At least 7 people killed across more than a dozen crime scenes. Tonight, the hunt for a motive. Growing more violent, protesters tossing bricks and firebombs. Police in Hong Kong firing back with tear gas, then storming the subway, attacking them underground. Hotel poison scare, the hazmat incident that sickened 9 people and left 1 person dead. Was it a suicide? Also tonight, actor Kevin Hart and his vintage car careening off a treacherous road. The car destroyed. How did he survive? And sharing the spotlight, Naomi Osaka defeating 15-year-old phenom Coco Gauff. The emotional moment that surprised everyone.
From ABC News, this is ABC World News Tonight.
And good evening. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday. I'm Tom Yamas, and we begin with the relentless threat from Hurricane Dorian, growing over the past 24 hours to a monster Category 5 storm. striking the Bahamas with 185-mile-per-hour winds and now heading towards the U.S. mainland. As we come on, take a look at this hurricane. It's still churning over parts of the Bahamas. Dorian slamming ashore in the northern Bahamas, the most powerful storm ever recorded to strike the island nation. The rain and storm surge flooding streets, surrounding homes, trapping people inside. The first images of the damage just coming in. Power and communications are gone. Tonight, Hurricane Dorian is now heading towards the U.S. mainland, but its impact in the Bahamas is revealing just how dangerous this storm can be. ABC's Marcus Moore is there in Abaco, Bahamas, reporting from inside the eye of the hurricane.
Tonight, Hurricane Dorian tearing across parts of the Bahamas. The powerful Category 5 storm pummeling the Abaco Islands with relentless rain and that damaging wind. You can see what it's doing here, and off in the distance, those waves crashing against the pier. Officials fear that this storm will leave catastrophic damage here in this part of the islands. The eye of the storm passing right through the Abaco Islands. Intense gusts continuing. The wind so strong we had to take cover inside. I don't know how well you can see it, but I want you to listen to the wind and the howl of the wind as it goes by. Look at that. Those are the wind gusts that we have seen and that officials have warned about.
The whole roof came off.
Roofs ripped away and the power knocked out. We've seen large pieces of debris flying in the other direction. All right, and it looks like we've just lost power. Not sure if we're still on.
Dorian, the second strongest storm ever recorded in the Atlantic. Our Denise Fernandez with Miami station WPLG, also at the same hotel.
We rode out the storm in the bunker room. We had to hold on to the door for about 10 minutes because if we let go, it would have blown off.
Americans stuck on these islands sending us these videos.
It's a little scary. Some of the roof pieces blowing off, but no structure yet.
The storm moving slowly across the region.
My baby's only 4 months old, please. Pray for us.
The aftermath devastating. Some of the homes here vulnerable to the storm's relentless winds. Now, the wait to see what Dorian has left behind of parts of this island nation.
And Marcus Moore and his team are still riding out this monster storm. Communications are very difficult tonight, as you can imagine, and as you saw in his report. But he just called in with this latest update.
I have seen utter devastation here in Marsh Harbor. We are surrounded by water with no way out. The storm surge taking over the terrain. Absolute devastation. There really are no words. It is pure hell here. We have also seen astonishing moments where people, we caught them swimming to safety. We had been hearing that this Category 5 would have devastating winds, and the meteorologists, the experts, the officials, they were right.
Marcus Moore and his team reporting from the center of Hurricane Dorian tonight. Now to the U.S. mainland, where Dorian has triggered states of emergency from Florida up through North Carolina. Tonight, mandatory evacuations are in place for 6 Florida counties, and just a short time ago, authorities adding parts of Jacksonville to the list. ABC's Victor Oquendo on the race to get away.
Tonight, the Category 5 monster. Hurricane warnings just issued in Florida, millions on high alert from here to North Carolina. The catastrophic storm expected to come dangerously close to Florida's coast.
It's a very dangerous storm, and a lot of people don't realize that even if it doesn't hit us directly, the winds and the rain are going to be devastating.
Mandatory evacuations just issued for parts of Jacksonville and 6 Florida counties, including Palm Beach, home of President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Hurricane Dorian's unpredictable track sending visitors searching for another place to stay.
Has this whole process been kind of nerve-wracking at any point for you?
A little bit, at least 4 hours of every day has been changing my schedule.
Residents scrambling for last-minute supplies.
And is this a brand new generator?
Yes, we just bought it.
When'd you buy it?
Just today.
Barrier islands like this one in Palm Beach County are under a mandatory evacuation, and here's why. Take a look from above. These are very narrow strips of land. They're surrounded by water on both sides. The storm surge could easily flood the entire area. The president canceling a trip to Poland, visiting FEMA headquarters today, saying he's surprised by Dorian's strength.
The Category 5 is something that I don't know that I've ever even heard the term, other than I know it's there. That's the ultimate, and that's what we have, unfortunately.
Drivers waiting in long lines to fill up on gas in Florida and in the Carolinas, where officials have now declared states of emergency.
North Carolina has to take this seriously. Be ready.
New video showing hundreds of utility trucks lined up in Florida, ready to respond.
And Victor Oquendo joining us now live from Delray, Florida. Dorian having a major impact on travel. And Victor, I know tonight you have new information on the plans for several major airports.
That's right, Tom. Palm Beach International shutting down tomorrow ahead of the storm. Orlando International staying open for the time being, but saying they'll be monitoring Hurricane Dorian. The best advice for passengers right now, double check with your airline. Tom?
Victor Oquendo live for us tonight. Victor, thank you. And as Victor reported, among the deadliest threats from this hurricane is the powerful storm surge that could be coming. Take a look at this drone shot in Melbourne Beach, Florida, showing just how close the water is to the roads there. ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano is right there tracking the approaching storm. Rob, good evening.
Good evening, Tom. We're already starting to feel the impacts of Dorian in the way of wind and some waves as it lashes the Bahamas less than 200 miles from this coastline. The strongest hurricane in this part of the world to make landfall since 1935. Look at it on the satellite pictures, still impacting it, and it has slowed to a crawl, unfortunately. So we have hurricane warnings that have been posted for the central Florida coastline from Jupiter through Cape Canaveral. We expect hurricane conditions within the next 36 hours. Let's talk about the next 24. Look how slowly it moves towards Freeport. By tomorrow morning, still not past it. Hurricane force winds there, maybe gusting over 100 miles an hour. Some weakening expected, but the wind field could be expanding. Here's the forecast track for the rest of the time. Looking for a Category 5 during the day tomorrow, getting to a Category 4, raking the coastline of much of Florida, West Palm to Melbourne during the day on Tuesday, a Category 3 on Wednesday abreast of Jacksonville, Savannah, Charleston on Thursday, North Carolina, Virginia on Friday, and much of the northeastern coastline. Any deviation to this track to the west, Tom, we are talking about a significant damage swath across much of the east coast of Florida. That's what we're worried about most tonight. Tom?
And that's why we're tracking it so closely. All right, Rob, our thanks to you. Now to our other breaking headline.
Breaking news tonight, Dorian is now one of the most powerful hurricanes in history, hitting the Bahamas right now with astonishing force. Wind gusts at least 200 miles an hour, roofs torn off homes, people fearing for their lives.
Please pray for us. Please pray for us, everyone. Please pray for us.
Forecasters warning it could actually change the geography of the Bahamas forever. The new track at this hour, Florida still on edge, mandatory evacuations ordered in some towns, and states up the East Coast watching the possible path. Also breaking tonight, highway shooting spree, a massive crime scene spanning 2 cities and 10 miles in Texas.
I knew he was trying. He was going to try to kill me.
7 dead, including a child, a baby, and policemen among the injured. Tonight, what we know about the shooter and why it could have been even worse. Plus, why the Pope was late to work today and who he thanked for getting him out of a jam.
This is NBC Nightly News with Kate Snow.
Good evening on what is going to be a terrifying night in parts of the Bahamas. Today, Hurricane Dorian became the most powerful hurricane to make landfall in the Atlantic in almost 80 years. It is lashing the northern islands of the Bahamas with torrential rain, life-threatening floods, and high winds. It's hitting the Abaco Islands right now. Some residents there begging people to pray for them and posting devastating images from that area. As the storm's path now puts it close to the Florida coast, evacuations are underway in some communities in that state, and the forecast shows Dorian moving north toward Georgia and the Carolinas. Our team is across the region tonight tracking the storm. There is now a hurricane warning in effect tonight for parts of eastern Florida as Dorian heads toward that state. Gabe Gutierrez is in one of those areas, Stuart, Florida, tonight.
Mandatory evacuation as of 1 p.m.
Tonight, along parts of Florida's east coast, the rush is on to get out.
This storm at this magnitude could really cause massive destruction, and do not put your life in jeopardy by staying behind.
In Palm Beach County, Donna Kirby is evacuating her parents, both in their late 80s.
If it doesn't take that turn north, it's coming straight in here at Category 5, so you have to act.
Today, President Trump visited FEMA's headquarters.
I'm not sure that I've ever even heard of a Category 5. I knew it existed. And I've seen some Category 4s. You don't even see them that much, but a Category 5 is something.
Yet during his administration, 3 hurricanes impacting the U.S. were Category 5s at one point: Irma, Maria, and Michael. For Dorian, preparations are stretching up to Georgia and the Carolinas. NBC's Kathy Park is in Charleston.
Coastal flooding has already been a problem here this past week with one of the highest tide levels of the year, so Dorian could only increase the risk of extreme flooding.
Back in Florida, businesses banking on Labor Day weekend rush to board up as Dorian intensifies.
It's something we're really counting on this time of year, but yeah, it came at a bad time, this storm.
And Gabe's with us now. Gabe, it's changed course a little bit over the weekend. Are you finding people are following the evacuation orders now?
Well, Kate, the evacuations began just a few hours ago for certain low-lying areas, and from what we have seen, many people are heeding the warnings. A Cat 5 will definitely get your attention. And to our north, more mandatory evacuations are expected tomorrow, Kate.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez out there. Thank you, Gabe. All weekend we have been talking about the path of this storm. WNBC meteorologist Rafael Miranda has the latest update for us.
And Hurricane Dorian has intensified into one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes on record. Here are the very latest stats. Winds 185 miles per hour, gusts over 200 miles per hour. Catastrophic damage likely in the Bahamas. And then the track takes Dorian as a major hurricane just offshore for the Florida coastline by about 50 miles. And there's still some room for change to that track. We'll be watching very closely. Another landfall possible in the Carolinas as we head towards the end of the week. New hurricane warnings in effect issued this afternoon for the east coast of Florida. We'll be tracking this one for the winds. Catastrophic winds in the Bahamas now through Monday. And then the rest of the southeast dealing with that wind threat throughout the rest of the week. Also heavy rain and a storm surge threat for millions in the southeast. Kate?
All right, Rafael, thank you. Now
we're averaging about 300 mass shootings a year. No other country comes close. So, yes, this is up.
We don't even know what's coming at us. All we know is it's possibly the biggest.
The president is also focused on Hurricane Dorian. He visited FEMA today for a briefing. The hurricane is now a monster Category 5 storm forecast to run up the U.S. East Coast.
A Category 5 is something that I don't know that I've ever even heard the term, other than I know it's there. That's the ultimate, and that's what we have, unfortunately.
This is actually the fourth Category 5 hurricane while President Trump has been in office, including Hurricane Maria, which devastated Puerto Rico, and Michael, which hit Florida less than a year ago. David?
Thank you, Ben. We're going to go now to Elaine Quijano. She's at the CBS Broadcast Center in New York City. She's got more on Dorian and some of the rest of the day's news. Elaine, good evening.
David, thank you. Dorian is now an extremely dangerous Category 5 hurricane. Right now, it is thrashing the Bahamas with maximum sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. It is expected to be catastrophic and deadly. Images captured by satellite show the massive storm system in the Atlantic turning slowly and moving west. Dorian's unpredictable path could threaten millions of Americans from Florida to the Carolinas. Meteorologist Jeff Berdelli is here with more on Dorian and the threat ahead. Jeff?
Elaine, this is a monster system. It is tied for the second strongest system in Atlantic Basin history with winds of 185 miles an hour in terms of the wind. It is an extremely strong storm, and it's began to slow down. It's moving west at 5, and it is going to crawl ever so slowly through the northern Bahamas over the next 24 to 48 hours or so. Hurricane warnings out from Cape Canaveral down to the Palm Beaches. Storm surge warning also in effect for 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. That's the official forecast track. Slows down, then it begins to speed up on Tuesday and Wednesday, moving up the eastern seaboard of Florida. But notice it's just offshore. Any track further west puts it onshore. That's why it needs to be watched very closely. Then it takes a turn to the northeast. And it still remains to be seen how close it comes to the North Carolina coast. What's steering it right now is a solid area of high pressure. That will break in two. The whole time it's over water temperatures 85 to 90 degrees, high-octane fuel. That's why it's such a strong storm. We hope the jet stream can catch it and move it out to sea. Some of our spaghetti models show it moving out to sea, but a few others have it making landfall in northeast Florida, and that is still a possibility. Elaine?
Jeff Berdelli, thank you.
You're welcome.
4 southeast states have declared states of emergency as Hurricane Dorian's path remains unpredictable and life-threatening. Mark Strassman reports from St. Augustine.
Up and down Florida's coast, Elaine, there's been a mood shift today, a greater intensity, a realization that Dorian is a significant threat. Just a slight shift in its path, and this coastline could be in for major misery.
Despite Sunday's blue skies, St. Augustine was a ghost town on Labor Day weekend. Throngs of tourists stayed inland, scared off by warnings of a potential menace offshore. We found Sprout Kitchen empty. It's Forrest and Greg Goldstein's new juice bar.
What was Labor Day supposed to be, and what is it?
Well,
It's supposed to be huge.
yeah, it was definitely something we were looking forward to as being a good weekend. We kind of postponed a lot of our production, had to cut our staff this weekend, so we're manning the fort ourselves.
Much of Florida's East Coast is now under a hurricane warning. Health First Cape Canaveral Hospital in Cocoa Beach began evacuating dozens of patients. 9 Florida counties have ordered evacuations, 5 of them mandatory. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
This storm at this magnitude could really cause massive destruction, and do not put your life in jeopardy by staying behind when you have a chance to get out.
That message is often lost on coastal residents here. Many are amateur storm trackers who trust their own forecasts.
We're concerned about it.
Rob Hardwick is the police chief in St. Augustine Beach. He worries about holdout residents.
This is their castle. This is their home. And with that being said, they're reluctant to leave everything they own in their whole lives. I just don't want to be complacent, because one shift in a few degrees and it's on top of us.
St. Johns County has now issued an evacuation order. It includes everyone who lives on this beach and the entire city of St. Augustine, Elaine. That order begins Monday morning, and it's mandatory.
Mark, thank you.